mandates, taxes, caps, or something to that extent. So this is today's big picture. Where we landed was we used to think about environmental issues in markets as a feature of the good, meaning public good, non-rival, non-excludable, or a side effect of the transaction for another good. And we realized that was a little bit limiting. It didn't allow us to capture all of the ways that people could lessen the side effect of the good in the case of an externality. So now we've changed the lens of the model to be about the market specifically for that side effect or environmental feature. And our example is abatement. We're thinking of that as just lessening of pollution, but it could just be any good. And we found that that was, when we modeled instead the market for abatement or pollution reduction, that it in fact looked very much like the market for any other good. We aggregated the supply of pollution reduction or abatement in the same way we aggregated supply for a private good, and we found features of welfare like the cost of pollution abatement in the same way that we were looking at the cost of supply for a private good. So that helped us get recapped back to where we were and last week. We also turned in our labs, I think, Thursday evening. Other big picture check-in, we have no section tomorrow night thanks to Veterans Day and our sporadic UC calendar, so will not be available to help you. We will of course do our best to answer any questions on email, but you still turned a problem in for tonight. So you'll discuss that problem next week. You'll just add another question from that problem set next week, Monday. We'll review that again on Wednesday. Yes.
So our homework next week is that being like problem set 7, it's going to be problem set 6, question 2.
Yes. Is that correct? Yes. Feeling good? Feeling settled? So our focus this quarter will have 3 policies that are going to be our main tools for the model in the market for abatement. We're going to think about the mandate, the tax, and the cap and trade. Of course, there are more environmental policies out there. There's technology standards, that's probably the biggest one. There's a lot of, if you think of the big Biden bill, a lot of subsidies to encourage investment in clean energy. So definitely don't want to give you the impression that these are the only options. They're just the canonical ones that have the most straightforward undergraduate exposition. This is like your classic environmental economics treatment. So definitely happy to dive into that other stuff with you after we do this and more later in the quarter. We'll have another session where we think a little bit about real life policies too. So our market for abatement, we're just flashing the picture that we ended with last time. We had this scenario, we had 2 steel plants, and they had different marginal costs of abatement. So let me just give you those highlights. What we're looking at again. So our horizontal axis here, ending in X, this is no longer a good, well, it is a good thing, but it's no longer a private good. It's not Q, it's reduction of pollution X. So recall that meant that kind of underneath it in its shadow x-axis, we had pollution Q. So when we've abated everything, way at the right, pollution is 0. And all the way at the left, when we've abated nothing, pollution is whatever its maximum is in the status quo, or whatever the status quo pollution is. So any reduction in pollution, meaning abatement, we model going rightward on the x-axis. We have our 2 friendly firms. One has pretty high marginal cost of reducing pollution, that was firm 1, and our firm 2 had more flat or lower marginal cost of reducing pollution, 8x2. The other thing we showed last class, well, let's go in order. So yeah, we said that we could imagine a status quo pollution of 20 at each firm. which means when there's no abatement, all the way over here, overall pollution Q bar is gonna be 40. And if both firms were to do all of their abatement, all the way out at 20 each, 40 total, then we'll have no pollution. Just to add some numbers to that pollution abatement transition. Okay. So they have different marginal costs of abatement, and the next thing we showed was that we could aggregate their two supplies of abatement to get the market supply of abatement, marginal abatement cost at the market level, MAC, and that came out to 6x. To get that, we did horizontal aggregation, just like in the private goods supply curve. What was important to note was if we calculated the cost of abating a certain amount of pollution, for example 5, from this MAC curve, the market level supply of abatement, that implied that the two firms were at their efficient allocation of pollution. So we thought for any amount of pollution to be abated, our key amount of interest was 5. We could have both firms abate the same amount. We could have one firm abate all of it. We considered these different scenarios. We calculated how much each cost. And we found there was this magic combination where their two marginal costs were equal. That gave the lowest overall cost. So recapping here, when we look at the MAC curve for the market, that's always assuming they're at that lowest overall cost because we did horizontal aggregation. I think our last big if, or kind of what's going on with this field when we look at this picture, is I also told you to imagine there was some social marginal benefit or demand for abatement curve. And I said, let's pretend it's 35 minus x. And I said, let's pretend that there's these people out there, like me personally, who are going around measuring the benefits to society of pollution reduction. And they're going to be able to tell a policymaker the slope of that curve, or its level, if nothing else, something about it, so that in theory a policymaker can know what Q star is. Fair enough, that's out there, in theory. So when we start to frame how we think about abatement policy, it's so funny how it's showing the erased line on the slide. I've never noticed that. It's not the worst. So often when we think of the environmental policy, the challenge is that there isn't naturally a market for abatement. I may wish to have less air pollution or cleaner water or lower carbon pollution, but it's not something I personally can go to a market and say, dear firm, please produce this good with less pollution, and I'll pay you a little bit for that pollution reduction. If that sounds familiar to you at all, it's because there's been quite an innovation in the last 15, 20 years where there are now things like carbon offset credits that celebrities can buy based on that idea. But if we go back to kind of our natural state of people interacting, that wasn't an existing market that you could go tell somebody, please pollute less, I'll pay you some money. So when we think of environmental policy, we think that the public, the government, is trying to come in and fill in, no, I don't think substitute, sorry, word I want to use, wants to fill in for that demand curve that doesn't otherwise exist, because this isn't otherwise a market people can go and purchase abatement of, for example, water pollution. So when we fill in this demand curve, the policy could either be perfectly flat demand, we need as much pollution abatement as possible at this price, or we can picture perfectly vertical demand for pollution abatement. You must give me X amount of reduction in pollution. Those are both potential policies, and we can frame those policies as the demand curve for abatement. So we're going to think of policies in this market as types of demand curves. That's our intellectual stuff. And that will help us understand how the firms respond to the policies. big picture, then we'll do details. First tool is the uniform mandate, or any mandate. Uniform mandate, the idea is the government will come in central planner style and say, let's agree when we're doing all three of these policies, mandate, taxes, cap and trade. We're always going to compare their effects for this lecture at the efficient, socially optimal quantity of abatement. We can do all these same questions for any quantity of abatement. We're just going to say this is our goalpost, 5. Let's look at 3 different ways to get to 5 and compare what they cost society overall and who wins, who loses. So what they cost each firm in particular. So what they cost the firms, what they cost each firm, what they cost society overall. So our goalpost is 5 units of abatement. We're going to compare for our 3 policies how those affect the 2 firms and the market overall. So our first one is the uniform mandate. If we wanted a uniform mandate to abate 5 units of pollution, what I mean is the central planner could go to the 2 firms and say, you abate firm 1, you abate 2.5 units of pollution, and you firm 2 abate 2.5 units of pollution. A mandate or a central planner need not necessarily be uniform. They could say, firm 1, due to political elitism reasons, I especially dislike you, and you need to do all of the abating, whilst firm 2 in state whose voters I prefer need do none. That's also a type of mandate. It's just not uniform. So by uniform, I'm saying imagine we split it evenly. But we can do mandate policy any way. Central planner can mandate however they want. So by uniform mandate, we're visualizing a policy where the government just tells firms you have to do X. Or yeah, you have to do little X little 1, X little 2. You have to do a specific amount of reduction. So if instead of wanting 5, we wanted 6, we could tell them 4 and 2, or we could tell them uniform 3 and 3. That's a little redundant, so I'm going to skip. We'll look at it in a second. So mandate at 2.5 would look like this. We'll get into the details later. Next big picture, tax. In a tax, the government's going to say, you can either abate or you can pay my price, tau, the tax. That's your choice, firm. And the government will pick what tau is. We're going to go through each of these in detail. Next big picture, the cap and trade. You've probably heard of it before. In a cap and trade, instead of giving the firms a mandatory amount, oh, I'm not feeling good, excuse me. Okay, so cap and trade. We'll go back on my cap and trade. Government says, instead of having the choice to pay the tax or to abate, you get a specific allocation of abatement that's assigned to your allocation of pollution. So if you were initially polluting 20, they'll say instead of having 20, you can only have 17.5. So you get kind of 2.5 abatement freebies, but they give you 17.5 pollution permits. They're de facto telling you you have to abate at least 2.5, but you can trade amongst each other those pollution permits. So that'll be our final policy. We'll look at that hopefully a little today, but probably on Wednesday. Okay. So big picture, mandate, we tell you how much to reduce. Tax, we give you the choice, pay the tax or reduce. And cap and trade, you get a permanent amount of pollution that you can trade amongst yourselves. So let's dig in. We'll start with our government mandate. Government mandate, our simple scenario for our goal of 5 units of pollution reduction, 5 units of abatement. We're gonna say let's require each of them to abate 2.5. Let's just start here. This is our example. Are we clear on the definition of this policy before we dive into analyzing it? So, government's telling both firm 1 and firm 2 that they need to abate by 2.5. Let's look at this from firm 1's perspective. What will it cost firm 1 to reduce their pollution by 2.5 units? And I will by clicker pull. You'll solve for it yourself and give me a number. All right. Are we stuck? Do we feel like it's solved?
Which is just 24 hours.
Unfortunately, I'm not agreeing with the current majority in the iClicker.
Oh, the other ones is just the other.
All right, let me say that without the. Yeah. I don't agree with the majority right now. So let me know if you have any confusion or uncertainty in your thinking.
It's too late. Too late for college career. I'm done. Please don't give me the feedback. You're so slow. Principles of environmental science. Yeah. I think it's a 5 years. Oceanography, that's for my water. Track. Maybe water. It does.
I'm taking those first 2 as well.
Oh, you are? Yeah.
It's the same with 3 people on every class.
Yeah, literally. I know somebody, like, I've seen, I think Kava is it's just real simple. Huge.
Since I don't agree with the majority, I'm doubting myself, but I will work it out. So we want to see how much this costs firm one. Let's plot, just focusing on firm one. I'll highlight firm one's curve. So we only care about this curve, and we're only thinking about the level of abatement 2.5. So we're thinking right here. So we know that the first little bit of abatement has additional cost here, the second there, so on and so forth. So we need to find this area under firm one's marginal cost curve. That's firm one's cost of abating 2.5 units of pollution. So we just looked at the integral from 0 to 2.5 of 24x1 dx1. This is firm one's marginal cost one. Do we agree? So I'll do this the triangle way first. We need 1/2 of our base, which is 2.5, so I'll say 5/2. And now we need to find the height of this triangle to do this method. So I need to have this at 24 times 5/2, 12 times 5, so I'm thinking 60. So a lot of people gave us 60. We can see that 60 is wrong. Does this help? Does someone on 60 want to keep thinking? So 60 is correct, that it's the marginal cost of abatement for firm one. 60 is not the total cost of abatement for firm one. So if you put 60, you probably just needed to clarify the question, total abatement cost of firm one. I think that's where most of us went wrong. Okay. So I'm gonna say this comes out to 75. That's 30 divided by 2 is 15 times 5. That makes sense to me. So 60 is what it costs the firm just to get that last little bit of pollution reduced. Overall, it costs 75. Redemption round. Let's do this for firm 2. So we'll do a minute and a half here. on the same page now, everyone got to 25, except one person, I think they were messing with me. So here we have our 2.5 units of pollution, filling in our figure, which means we need to measure this total cost of firm 2. And we'll do this time the calculus way just for fun. We're looking at the integral of 8x2 dx2. So that's 4x2 squared from 0 to 5 halves. No one cancels nicely. So 2 methods to solve these types of questions. You can always do the geometry. When you're doing the geometry, be careful that you're getting the height and width of any rectangles or triangles correct using the functions in the figure. Or you can do the integral. Notice a common theme, I always draw the picture. If I'm writing the calculus or I'm doing the geometry, I use the picture to guide me so I get the algebra correct. There's definitely people that are hardcore, go straight algebra. It's not wrong, but I'm a visual person, so you may use the word. Also, if you draw the picture in an exam setting and it's labeled correctly, that's a lot of the credit. Like, never have to really find the number. Everything's labeled nicely. Okay. So mental note. So we found, just a little side note. So firm 1 cost here was 75. Firm 2 cost was 25. So we're coming out to a total cost to society of 100 for 5 units of abatement in total. We're gonna preview, spoiler, we can do better than that. We can get 5 units of abatement for less than $100 in this society. We'll see that in a minute with the tax. We also know that from last class because we thought hypothetically if we were at the efficient allocation of abatement, we could lower these costs from this even allocation. Does that mean that uniform mandates are bad? Open discussion before we go into the tax. So we just found a policy. It got us 5 units of abatement, costs $100. Good or bad? How would you discuss that? We're missing one of our top participants today. Yes.
I feel like they're not necessarily bad, because like if we're working across a lot of firms, it can be really challenging to like make sure they're all doing their exact like exact efficient allocation versus like a uniform one, like you can, it's a little bit easier to make sure everyone's like following the same quantity of limit.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in the simple policy. Everyone do this. For example, uniform mandate forthcoming in California. All vehicles must be electric vehicles by 2030. There wasn't any, we need X quantity of electric vehicles, consumers trade it amongst yourselves or automakers figure this out. It was just everybody do it. And that can be like, that can also have, we're going to say political economy benefits. That's something people can vote for and get behind. It's not necessarily fair. We can see that one of these firms paid a lot more money under this policy than the other one. So it's hard to say that it's fair, but people tend to use that word. At least like, we're all looking at the same number of required abatement then. And sometimes that makes environmental policy more palpable when we go out of the classroom and into practice. We also can say about a policy like this, if we integrated our marginal benefit curve up to 5, in theory, this is going to be a little complicated argument off of the picture, so this is just coming to me to point out if we summed the benefits to society of 5 units of abatement, that's that 35 minus X, it's likely that it's worth it to society. I don't know exactly what that number comes out to, 150, 200, $1 billion, because we avoided catastrophic collapse of the climate. So even though this wasn't the lowest or most efficient cost to achieve this, it can still be worth it in an overall cost-benefit sense. Just to point out. So not the worst policy to think about. Modeling who wins, who loses, what it costs. So useful. So next policy. Enter the tax. We thought about taxes before in the case of a market for a single good. Now we're thinking about the tax in the case of the market for abatement. And we're gonna think of the tax just like a flat demand for abatement at a fixed number. In our case, we're gonna say 30. 30 is our Pagouvian tax. So just like before, we're gonna have the Pagouvian tax be the tax that achieves the efficient or socially optimal quantity of abatement. I'll pause there, that's an important concept, and we're not writing it down because it's on the slide. So, or I can write it down just to make sure we're adequately slow. Pagouvian tax achieves X star, efficient quantity of abatement. In order to get the overall market to the efficient quantity of abatement, in this case it's 5, we need to set the Pagouvian tax at the marginal benefits of the socially optimal quantity. And it's not depicted here. So let's see where I have this. So policymaker comes in. Just want the highlight to give you only what you need and nothing else. Focus on this. The benefit to society at the socially optimal quantity of abatement we want polluters to reduce their pollution up to the socially optimal level of abatement. So if we tax them at the marginal benefits of the socially optimal level of abatement, then they will equate their abatement costs with that particular benefit. I think I'm making this more complicated than I need to. Okay, we're gonna do our break. I'm gonna come back with intuition on the Pagouvian level of the tax, and we'll do this market with the tax. So let's take 2 minutes here.
Angela, was close to making money.
Yeah. On the weekend, I made 240K. Or like, more like 60%.
It's just like your marginal costs for the next one. Like, that's what I have to do, right?
I think so, yeah, especially if you make one price.
Oh my gosh, that's what my strategy that
Yeah, just to make the most money, like, net profit.
Yeah.
Are you guys profiting now?
Yeah, we're in the process.
What's that profit? Okay.
Well, I guess if he was just
We did $10,000.
he was always doing good. I don't know. I mean, I wish I could.
Yeah.
We fixed our shoulders and we made a lot of money too. I don't know how we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Because we don't have renewables.
I'm so
I think I have a lot of where they're like, the market will be just like just through our marginal costs. Like we're gonna be like,
So fun.
we're gonna be near.
Yeah.
And then you can get rid of some like,
Yeah.
But
our daily costs are
good for
really
him.
low.
Where's the video?
I mean, our service
Yeah.
is only $8,000.
Have you finished
It's not like we don't need to make our
Our team is just,
I'm honestly surprised that you
we're
guys
making it work.
are going to make money.
I know.
It's actually pretty impressive. I was like, no
That's like
way.
the comeback of a century.
I wonder how many interviews
I know, yeah.
I wish we like worked with some like 50 girls.
If you let me see what you have to, like, what's the last day or something.
There's like 2 groups.
There's one or two.
That was the other girl. But the no, literally have her renewal.
Oh, they do.
Oh, she's dead. She's gone.
Tony's
I mean, my dad's taking it to like the store because it's at home.
And they can probably do so much permanently. Because all their classes are so much bigger.
I see it with your paper.
Yeah, my little paper.
Yeah.
That's okay. I forgot my hotspot.
That's crazy.
It's kind of fun.
No, I
It is
so
fun.
I like my brother's.
Anticipation when the results
I know,
come
because
out.
it's like notification at
I've been using that.
Instagram.
It's actually the final battery life came in for like an hour, which is unfortunate.
I know.
Starts sounding like a helicopter, like 5 minutes over there.
And then he's like,
Yeah.
oh, with the loud fans.
I know, I'm like, dude, what? That's crazy.
Basically.
We really have one camera.
Exactly the sound, exactly how
They're
loud.
pumps out.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I haven't even watched it.
Okay, so I think our slide got our exposition a little bit backwards. We're gonna come back.
I'm a bro, look at the back. She fitted up. Seriously? She always fitted up though. I love her sweater and more heels. I have a look all like Girl, you too. Look the same stuff.
This like roundabout concept when you like text
I wish I could wear my docs. I miss my docs.
Alright, we're coming back. So we were discussing the Pigouvian tax in the market for abatement, and we're gonna come at it from a slightly different angle. So first, we're just gonna think about how the tax works, and then we'll see where the Pigouvian tax is positioned. I think that'll be more straightforward. So we're just for one. This is our cost curve 8x1, and we're told we typically pollute 20 out here. And let's pretend you gave me a tax of tau. Let's pretend you told me you have to pay tau. So what's this firm gonna do? If this firm doesn't do any abating, they're gonna pay this huge tax bill for all these 20 units of pollution. No abating, 20 units of pollution. They pay this whole tax bill, tau times 20. Now let's pretend instead, for the first good, they notice that they could abate for this area. First good, it would cost them that much to abate for one good. Whereas if they pay the tax, they have to pay the whole Tau, all of Tau. So for one good, they would only need to pay the pink area to do the abatement themselves. And if they pay the tax, they have to pay the entire height, red bar Tau. Which, at least in this example, I said picture was 30, but it could be anything. So if you were this firm, what would you do? Yeah, you abate. All in favor of abate, yeah. No reason to pay tax if you don't have to, just abate. Can we think of a silly example where I face the same choice? Tax or change my behavior? Yeah.
Like, if you take the toll road or if you leave a supplement or anything like that.
Yeah, I definitely have substituted on time a little bit. I don't know if I the toll road, but fair enough. Yeah, good one. So this firm will make the same choice for another unit of abatement and another unit of abatement. So it will choose to abate the quantity, some amount, up until some amount, x1 Tau. It will choose to abate until its marginal cost of abatement is equal to the tax. So with Tau equal to 30, how much will each firm abate? Firm 1, we're saying each firm with a tax. So as long as the firm's marginal cost is less than Tau, the firm will abate. So in other words, x1 Tau is such that marginal cost of firm 1 of x1 Tau is equal to Tau. So abate x1 is equal to our example tax of 30. This tells us that x1 with tax is 30 over 8. I think that was our 1.25. Does that make sense? Did I flip from 1 and 2? I think I flipped firm 1 and firm 2. Oh, team, I'm so sorry. Firm 1 had cost 24x1 and firm 2 had cost 8x2. Where is the less confusing answer here? Should we stick with our 8 and just call everything 2's? So we were actually looking at firm 2 in our one practical example. I think we could have just substituted the 20, but that's okay. Okay, so firm 2 will go up to 3.75. same question, now we'll look at from firm two's perspective. So with the tax of 30, firm one.
Did we just do this one and now we're doing 24?
Oh no. Am I going crazy? I think I am. Thank you. My brain just really wants to do 8x1 tonight. I am very sorry. Okay, so we are on our firm one. Firm one has the steeper marginal costs. Firm one's marginal costs are 24x1. Now, firm one's facing our tax. We're thinking of it as 30, but it could be any number. We're gonna find the quantity such that the firm's marginal cost is equal to the tax. So 24x1 is equal to our tax of 30, which means that this quantity, firm one, will abate, tau is 1.25. Now my question, how much does firm one pollute? How much does firm one pay in tax? How much does firm one pollute? Got me thinking about that movie Groundhog Day where they just keep having the same thing. I just keep solving 8x1 for you. Under our status quo, before this policy comes into effect, we said that firm one's polluting 20. That was our baseline. So we then said under this policy, so pollution was 20, firm one pollution. And now we're gonna subtract firm one's abatement, which was 1.25, firm one abatement. And so this gets us to firm one's pollution, 18.75. Tax bill is going to be then pollution, 18.75. Times the tax, we're saying 30. the socially optimal quantity of abatement, in this case 5, there's an equal marginal cost and marginal benefit to society. I think it's fair to look at that as MECX also. That's the definition of the socially optimal quantity. Your intuition can work both ways there. So there's some marginal benefit to society of reducing pollution. If we set that amount as the tax, we can see that each firm will abate up until their marginal cost of abatement is equal to that tax or marginal benefit to society. That got us to 1.25 and 3.75. And together that achieved the socially optimal quantity. If we had instead taxed higher, we would have gotten more abatement than the socially optimal quantity. Again, that can still be good in a cost-benefit sense, but it won't recover X star, so we're not going to call it the Pigouvian tax. And if instead we had charged less, we would still get abatement down here, lesser amounts. Still better probably than no abatement. We could crunch the numbers. But it won't get us to the socially optimal quantity, so we won't call it Pigouvian. So special tax that gets us to the socially optimal quantity, which is the height of the marginal cost and marginal benefit curves at the socially optimal quantity, we call it the Pigouvian tax. Our next big thing today before we foreshadow the cap and trade is to compare the tax and the mandate in terms of overall costs and who pays what. So before we dive in, it's going to be a little repetitive of what we've already done, which I think I'm okay with because I had this little mess up on firm 1, firm 2. So you'll get to see it like yet again. I just want you to take a breath because we're going to do it one more time and ask questions. But also see that I'm not trying to do too many new moves here. So foreshadowing, we're now just gonna do a big cost accounting mandate versus tax. So we can say which is more efficient overall, and which is better for firm 1, which is better for firm 2, who pays, which is better for firms in general. Those are the kind of questions we wanna answer with this. So we're gonna put everything we've done together. I think, cause this little slides got messy, we're gonna do it on just a nice sheet of paper. So big summary from what we've done. Summary, mandate, uniform mandate versus tax. Our question? First, we'll look at the abatement cost to firms. Under the uniform mandate, we had firm one abate 2.5, and we found that it cost 75. We had firm two abate 2.5, and we found that that cost 25. So in total, this got us to 100 in abatement cost to firms. Now for our tax. I get to do my AVEX one final time. 30, we found that that took, oh, excuse me, 24x1, no we don't, not yet, okay. Firm one is at 24x1, it abates 1.25 with the tax. So it needs to pay its abatement costs. This area. So 15 times 1.25, 15.75. Then it needs to pay its tax bill. And it had left over 20 units of pollution minus 1.25 abatement times the tax bill of 30 per unit. And so when we got that a minute ago, we came up with 500. What's that? Yeah, 562. So reviewing firm one here, tax to society 18.75 in abatement cost. Firm one has 18.75 for 1.25 units. We'll look at our tax now for firm two. The X1, tax of 30, it got 3.75 units. Firm two is going to pay this area in abatement. I think it's 562.5. So we told firm two, you have to pay tax of 30. It chooses to abate 3.75 and pay tax on the remainder. It will cost it $56.25 to do 3.75 units of abatement based on its marginal costs. And firm two's tax bill times 3.75 times the bill of 30, and that gets us to 487.5. We can already tell the firms are much worse off with the tax. But abatement costs are gonna be low. Okay, so up here we have, in our summary now, 56.25. Thank you, Will, did you sanity check this? Two at 3.75. So big picture, we're summarizing at the top, and I gave you detail underneath. We found the abatement cost to firms under the uniform mandate, where both of them abate 2.5. And then we found the abatement cost to firms under the tax. To do the abatement cost to firms under the tax, we got a little detailed. We had to figure out how much they would abate with the tax. We did that in the slides, so I went through that quickly here. We had to calculate what they paid to abate with that amount, the shaded area. And then we had to also calculate their tax bills. So up here I just wrote their abatement costs. So overall abatement costs to society, with the tax is only $75, but with the uniform mandate is $100. Tax bill, lower that. Tax bill. Under the uniform policy 0, under the tax, we'll just copy in what we had. We had 562 for firm 1.5. And we had 487.5. So that came out to 1,050. So are firms better off or worse off with the uniform mandate or the tax? If we were in the simulation, you got to pick which world you lived in and you knew you were going to be a firm owner, which world do you want? Yeah. Which one? Left column?
Yeah.
Yes, left column, uniform mandate. That tax bill is really big for the firms. So firms are definitely better off, so to speak. They're individual winners in the uniform mandate world. So we talked about whether the uniform mandate was good or bad. We said something's kind of appealing to people, ex ante, in a policy situation. We can also see that playing out in the model here. If you're a firm, you would pick the uniform mandate over the tax. Government revenue, also 0 under the uniform mandate, but it comes back from the firms in the tax. So maybe we could use some of this government revenue, we could give it back to the firms, so they're not quite so worse off under the tax. Maybe we take the government revenue and we give it to everybody evenly, like we did in the lab. Perhaps we take the government revenue, we use it to, we invest it in other social programs, or we change other taxes instead. There's a lot of the who wins, who loses in the world with the tax depends on what we do with the government revenue. We have a lot of ways we can pay off the losers in society with the government revenue. Pollution damages. How would we measure the pollution damages in this world? So subsection pollution damages. gave us your arithmetic here, it was 437.5. The benefits to society of any policy that reduces pollution by 5 units. We aggregated the benefits to society of 5 units of abatement. What's 2 important keys to notice? It's not critical for our comparison of the policies because both of them got us to 5 units of abatement. So we could simply look at the costs to say which policy is more efficient overall. It's still interesting to see that society overall benefits 437. Doesn't matter which policy we do, they're both worth it in the cost benefit sense. So total. I'm just gonna put this one as like an optional row. No, so total cost. In the case of the uniform mandate, we paid 100 in abatement. And then we still have some pollution. And in the case of the tax, we paid $75 plus some pollution damages. We're gonna retitle this row, I think this is a better title, we're gonna call that abatement benefits. Okay, so where do we land? Firms are much worse off under the tax, but society overall is better off because we were able to reduce pollution in a more efficient fashion.
Why wouldn't you add the tax to the cost of the second column in the total cost?
Yes, we added the tax for the firms, but then we included it as a government revenue. So, thing that's cool about the tax, when we were talking about the uniform mandate or setting a mandate policy, we said one downside of it is we don't know what the right amount is to require of each firm. If you wanted to uniform mandate the efficient quantity, efficient allocation, you'd have to know for each firm, what is its cost curve? You'd have to go firm 1, what does it cost you to reduce pollution? Firm 2, what does it cost you to reduce pollution? Given how much I want reduced overall, you have to do this, you have to do that. Firms are likely, if the government wanted to do that, going to lie. They're gonna act like it's super costly for them, so they don't have to do very much abatement. Tax is a really powerful tool because the government need only think of one particular number the amount they think is gonna get them close to the socially optimal quantity. And even that, I'll grant you, is likely a hypothetical, they just gotta pick some number they agree on. And for that marginal benefit of abatement or flat abatement demand curve, wherever the tax is, the tax will get the firms to reduce to have their marginal costs equal to the tax. And thus they'll be at the efficient allocation for that tax levels abatement. So long sentence about the taxes. So what's cool about tax is it gets you to the efficient allocation of abatement because firms will equate their marginal cost with the tax. And if we set the tax just right to get the socially optimal quantity of abatement, then we'll be at the efficient allocation of abatement for the socially optimal quantity. So taxes have this cool feature. We don't need to know each firm's individual marginal cost curve. If we just set the tax, they're going to allocate that abatement efficiently, or where their marginal costs are equal. So we thought about the $30 tax. We won't solve this, I just want to flag it for you when you're studying. We can set the tax to any level and figure out how much each firm will choose to abate, how much abatement that'll give us in total, and what that would cost society. Next time we'll do cap and trim. Okay. Other big picture takeaways, just since we were slightly disjointed. Nothing else to reiterate on here. Were there any other questions on here? Yes.
How do you calculate the tax bill for each firm?
Yes, good point to highlight. So where we found the tax bill for each firm was mostly in this slide. We had to figure out how much each firm was polluting. So since our status quo pollution was 20, we found their pollution by the status quo pollution minus how much they abated. So first tax 30, we'll find abatement 1.25. That means pollution is down to 8.75. So find pollution. And then the tax bill is pollution times the tax per unit pollution. Thank you. This one actually. Optional. Okay, thank you very much for your patience.
Yeah, yeah.
See you Wednesday.
I know, what's up? Did you make it in time? Did you make your first?
No, but that, yeah, it was not for the class, it was one thing. It's just, I think, yeah, I just sent you.
But I feel like this was, they've gone and looked at it. The first one, I was like, oh my god.
Where'd you guys go? Wait, that's my,